The deep world of winter squash. How many things can you do with winter squash? Well, I'm gonna show you at least 3 things. This is Southern Girl meets Vegetarian Boy. Welcome, everyone. Winter squash is a little different than summer squash. Once it gets mature, the outside, the skin, turns hard. That's what makes a winter squash a winter squash. This is a butternut squash that I've peeled. This is a spaghetti squash. This is also a spaghetti squash. What? We're making winter squash slaw, spinach and artichoke stuffed spaghetti squash, and we're making butternut squash Wellingtons. What? You're just gonna lob off the top, so you cut that in half, and then we come in, and we're gonna scoop out the seeds so we can grate it for our winter squash slaw. I split the spaghetti squash down the center and I've taken out the seeds. So you could use whatever squash you have on hand for these recipes. Kabocha would be delicious, pumpkin, acorn squash, all of these will work pretty interchangeably. One is a stuffed squash, one is roasted squash put into Wellington. The other recipe, we grate the squash raw. What? Can you even do that? You can 100% do that. So aggressively season it, right? Because each of these is about 1 pound. And so put some seasoning on there, right? Don't be afraid of it. Like, whoa, spaghetti squash, bland-tacular. As this guy cooks, this little cavity inside of there is gonna fill up with steam, making the entire thing cook nice and evenly. The neck of the butternut is gonna become the filling for my Wellington. Give them a little brush, season them up with salt and pepper, and then into a 400-degree oven until they're nice and tender. About 25 to 30 minutes. Look at here, so pretty. Okay. Our squash need to cool before we can move forward. But no problem, because we can work on our grated butternut slaw. Just box grate it. You can also use a food processor if you have one. That's a great idea. Let's make our dressing. It's gonna be a combination of creamy, tangy, and sweet. That's fun, right? So 2 tablespoons of mayonnaise, a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. You can also use whole grain mustard, that'd be delicious. 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. That's our sweetness. We also have some cherries, 2 tablespoons. Give this all a little whisk. If you don't have cherries, you can use apricots or raisins or cranberries. Any dried fruit is gonna work here. If you don't have red wine vinegar, sherry vinegar is absolutely delicious. Apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, whatever. You just need an acid to start breaking down the fibers from our butternut squash, okay? Now, we're gonna put in our butternut squash. It's all grated. Just drop that in. This is about 1 pound of shredded cabbage. This is a fantastic recipe for the holidays, right? It's so good for Thanksgiving when you're looking for a butternut squash recipe, but you want something that's fresh instead of heavy. I'm putting in some fresh herbs. I have parsley, green onions are great here. Basil is delicious, whatever you have. Because winter squash lasts for so long, this is a really fun recipe to use up the rest of your winter squash in the spring. And then we're gonna season with a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper, because that's gonna pull out some of the moisture. Now we give it a toss, and you can see it's nice and saucy, but it still looks really fresh. As this hangs out in the refrigerator and those flavors all marry, it's just gonna get better and better and better. So this is good in like 30 minutes, but tomorrow it's gonna be even more delicious. Put in most of your pepitas. I saved just a few for the top, so that when I plate it, I sprinkle them on the top and it looks fancy. People are like, oh, are those pepitas? No pepitas, no problem. Sunflower seeds or almonds or pecans or walnuts, anything that's gonna add some protein to this little angel. Now just into a serving bowl. And you have this gorgeous side that's ready to go. It was fast, it's easy, it's so fresh, and it's such an unexpected way to see winter squash. My favorite of all the winter squashes, delicata. What's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, you might as well subscribe to this channel. You might as well like this video. Thanks so much. Those remaining pepitas, just all over the top for texture. Let's taste this little angel. You're gonna love this. The texture of the butternut squash is so surprising. There's this really, really nice sweetness from the cherries and from the maple. You're also getting a ton of crunch, not only from those pepitas, but from the cabbage and the texture of the butternut squash itself. This is a textural masterpiece. I don't know if textural is a word, but it should be. It's so fresh, it's so fabulous, it's so fast. That is one fabulous and unexpected way to use winter squash, but how about I show you another one? Spinach and artichoke stuffed spaghetti squash. Woo! Let's do it.
Winter squash, recipe 2, take 1.
Spinach and artichoke stuffed spaghetti squash is going to be your new favorite way to eat spaghetti squash. I promise you, I promise. Most of the time people think of spaghetti squash and they put like a red sauce on it, which is delicious, but it's very, very saucy, right? Saucy. Why don't we fill it with something creamy and thick and vegetal? What? Vegetal. That's a word.
Okay, I believe you.
For real. Vegetal. Phillips, incredible. Phillips, legible. You're gonna need 8 ounces of plant-based or regular cream cheese. To that, I'm gonna add in a cup of chopped artichoke. You know, one of my favorite things are the frozen artichokes. We need 1 cup of a frozen spinach that has been thawed. Do not drain it though. We want the liquid. Look at how much spinach that is. You still want all that liquid because that's what's gonna make our cream cheese into a sauce. Seasoning with a little bit of lemon pepper. That's a tablespoon of lemon pepper. We're getting saltiness, we're getting pepper, but we're also getting a little zip from that lemon pepper. I have 6 ounces of grated cheese. I'm putting 4 into the mixture, and then I'm saving just a little bit to sprinkle on the top. Give this all a stir, and we are ready to fill our baked spaghetti squash. If you wanted to, you could make this and put pasta with it, but then you wouldn't be talking about winter squash. You'd be talking about spinach and artichoke pasta, which is actually very, very delicious. Notice how it's coming together? And it almost is a sauce. That's because we didn't drain that frozen spinach. If you drain that frozen spinach, this would be too dry. I'm putting this into spaghetti squash, but you could absolutely put this filling into any sort of a squash. This is great in a butternut squash. You could put this into pumpkin. You could put this into acorn squash, whatever you have around the house. I just like spaghetti squash because it's an underutilized winter squash. Don't you agree? Divide the filling evenly between your 2 spaghetti squash. If you're using a smaller squash, this will be enough filling for 4 halves. And now sprinkle cheese over the top. That's for our food porn shots later. Not really. Now, into the oven we go. 350 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes until it is golden brown and bubbling hot. Let's grab these little guys. Woo! Oh my gosh! Y'all, look at that. I just hold it and then cut straight through. Look at all of that. I can't wait. I can't wait to try it. I can't wait to try it. I can't wait to try it. Come here. What's so fun about spaghetti squash is as you use your fork, it kind of shreds into noodles. And so as you're eating it, you'll grab like a little bit of spaghetti squash and twirl it. And as you're twirling it, it's picking up all of that delicious spinach and artichoke filling. That is to burn your mouth for. That is the best way to eat spinach and artichoke. It is so creamy. The artichoke and the spaghetti squash together are a perfect complement. They're both very, very delicate, very subtle flavors, and the spinach is adding a ton of nutrients, plus this like really, really deep irony flavor. You have the creaminess of your cheese plus the cream cheese. Everything works together to create the perfect balance for a meal. One more bite, just kidding. I'm done. We made the slaw, we've made stuffed spaghetti squash, and now we've got one more squash. Wellington. Did I look bad when I did that? Like such a tough girl? Squash Wellington is going to be the new centerpiece for any of your vegetarian holiday dinners. We need to make a mushroom duxelle to go inside of our Wellington. A duxelle is just a stuffing made of finely chopped and then sauteed mushrooms. I'm using vegan feta in it so that this will be plant-based. A little bit of oil into your pan, and then I'm putting in 8 ounces of ground cremini mushrooms. I chopped them all up in my food processor. And this is gonna cook down quite a bit. Just give it a little toss so that everything is coated in the oil, and cook it down until they're nice and like the liquid all evaporates. It'll get very, very dark in color, and the volume is gonna shrink. A little stir, and then pat it out and let it cook for a few minutes until all the moisture evaporates. To season my duxelle, I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of onion dip mix. You've all had it before. It's like the French onion soup mix. And it's onion powder and tons of other little seasonings, and then dehydrated onions. So we want to put them in while our mushrooms are still wet so that it reconstitutes all of that seasoning. It really creates a ton of flavor inside of this squash and mushroom Wellington. If you don't have that onion mix, just use salt, pepper, dehydrated onions, dehydrated garlic. Give it a little stir, and you can see it's cooking all down. Look, it's already starting to release some of the moisture and get smaller in size. I'm gonna stir in some vegan feta. You can also use traditional feta, or goat cheese is great in this. It just makes it a little bit creamier. That's 3 ounces of crumbled plant-based feta. You can also use traditional feta. Goat cheese would be great too, or cream cheese. Y'all know I like cream cheese. Are you loving these recipes? Please subscribe to our channel. Just press that little button. Maybe give it a like or a comment. All of that means so much to us when we're trying to create content and build a community of vegetarian and vegan friends. Okay, our duxelle's ready. So let's build our Wellington. If you remember, we roasted that butternut squash for 25 minutes at 400 degrees. Let your duxelle cool down for just a couple of minutes. You can't put hot ingredients into puff pastry. There's lots of plant-based puff pastries. Just grab one of those if you're making this vegan. They're usually in the freezer or refrigerated section. And I'm gonna roll mine out just a little bit more to about the size of a half of a sheet pan. Oh my gosh, you're so pretty. And to pick them up, you just roll onto your rolling sheet like that. Put your pan in and roll back out. This is a little bit delicate, so we're just gonna build onto the pan, right? You wanna cool down your mushrooms enough so that when you put the cheese in, it doesn't melt away. Add your mushrooms to your puff pastry. Now you're going to smooth that all out. This is gonna come over like a little envelope, right? Boom. So that kind of let you know where you need your mushrooms to go. And then the bottom rolls up on the edge, so you leave about a ½ inch all the way around. That's looking pretty, right? So you can already see there's gonna be a ton of flavor. We have all of the onion powder, we have the vegan feta, we have our sauteed mushrooms. That's going to be very, very flavorful. What I do with this is, so that it's nice and flat, I lobe off the top usually, like this. Okay. Put down that butternut there. I do the same on my other side. Cut off the top. If you have larger butternut, you don't have to do this, but because mine was a little tiny, I go like that, like this, and then this guy gets stacked on top of that guy. So it's all the same size, right? And now we just close them up. It's no big deal, right? Nobody's gonna know it's all stuffed inside of something. Let me show you how you fold this. We bring this all the way over, pull it, we pull it back, and just wet along that edge, the top edge, because we're gonna fold this up. And then we're gonna just seal it, and you just kind of roll and press and press. You need that water so that it seals. You're like, oh, is that it? Wait a second. We give it a little scoring, just very, very lightly across the top. That's gonna make sure that as the puff pastry cooks, it doesn't crack, the air escapes where we want it to, but it also makes it look even more attractive. And then to make sure that it browns beautifully, I'm gonna brush it with an egg wash or a plant-based egg wash. Look at there. And then that's gonna make it get nice and golden brown all over. We're gonna bake this at 400 degrees for about 30 to 35 minutes until the top is golden brown and the pastry has puffed. Hence the name, puff pastry. Well, what a little angel. Look at her. Gorgeous, golden brown, so delicious. Here's the hard part about this. In order for me to try a bite, I'm gonna have to cut into this. It's just part of the job, you all. Can you hear that? The crunch. I cannot wait for you to see this. Looky there. What? Can you believe how gorgeous that is? Are you dying right now? So you have a layer of those sauteed mushrooms with our feta, and then this tender little squash inside of there. Let's give her a try. Don't mind if I do. Oh my gosh, you all. You get so much umami punch from the mushrooms with that onion dip. It is out of control. It's ultra creamy because of our vegan feta. And then we have sweet, tender butternut squash enrobed in flaky puff pastry. Damaris, you have done it again. It's such a good recipe that you can pick this little angel up, like a little hand pie. I eat them. It's so good. Oh my God, I love it. This tastes like heaven. It's so flaky. Whoa, cut. This is like a low-carb dream over here. We started with our winter squash slaw, which used raw grated squash, crunchy cabbage, pepitas that were roasted and salted, and a dressing that was sweet and savory. Spinach and artichoke stuffed spaghetti squash, perfect for anyone gluten-free in your life and easy to make vegan, but you still get all of that creamy, all of that dreamy, and all those vegetables. We finished with the real centerpiece of a table, the squash Wellington. Squash Wellington is not only beautiful, it's also extremely tasty. Tender butternut squash, which was sweet and oh so perfect inside of that crispy, crunchy puff pastry. I think it's just a perfect recipe. And that is winter squash 3 ways on this episode of Southern Girl Meets Vegetarian Boy. I'll see you next time, y'all. Bye. I'm gonna explode with squash for you, girl. I'm exploding squash for you.